December 18th, 1943, weapons testing facility, Kummersdorf, Germany. Hauptmann Ernst Fischer pressed the buttstock of the American rifle against his shoulder and aligned the peep sight on a target 200 meters downrange. The M1 Garand felt different in his hands, heavier than his Karabiner 98k by perhaps half a kilogram, but balanced differently. The weight sat further back. The stock was thicker, more substantial. He had been testing captured weapons for the Heereswaffenamt, the Army Weapons Office, for 18 months. Soviet submachine guns, British Sten guns, American carbines. This was different. Fischer had read the intelligence reports. 8 rounds, semi-automatic fire, gas-operated. The Americans had standardized this rifle across their entire infantry in 1936, 7 years before Germany entered the war. He'd dismissed it as American extravagance, a wealthy nation spending resources on unnecessary complexity when a simple, reliable bolt action served perfectly well. Now, he had one in his hands. The metal was cold. December in Brandenburg was brutal, but the rifle's mechanisms had functioned flawlessly during the morning's reliability tests, -15 degrees Celsius. The Garand had fired every round without malfunction. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked. The recoil pushed back into his shoulder, firm but manageable. Before he could process the first shot, his finger was already on the trigger again. Second shot, third, fourth. The target's downrange, man-sized silhouettes painted on wooden frames jerked with each impact. Fifth shot, sixth, seventh, eighth, the distinctive metallic ping as the end block clip ejected. 8 shots in 4.6 seconds. Fischer lowered the rifle. His hands were trembling slightly, and it wasn't from the cold. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Behind him, Oberstleutnant Heinrich Müller stood with a stopwatch and a clipboard. Müller had commanded an infantry battalion in France in 1940, had fought in the opening phases of Operation Barbarossa, and now served as a weapons evaluation specialist. He'd seen combat with the Kar98k for 3 years. He understood what rifle fire meant in actual battle. Müller checked his notes and spoke quietly. 4.6 seconds for 8 aimed shots. Your Kar98k record for 8 shots is 19.2 seconds. The American rifle delivers aimed fire at 4 times your rate. Fischer knew the mathematics were accurate. He'd fired tens of thousands of rounds through the Kar98k during training and combat. A well-trained German infantryman could cycle the bolt-action rifle, acquire the target, and fire approximately 10 to 15 aimed shots per minute. Fischer himself, an expert marksman, could achieve 16 shots per minute under ideal conditions. The M1 Garand had just delivered 8 shots in under 5 seconds. That translated to over 90 aimed shots per minute if ammunition supply wasn't a limiting factor. Not sustained automatic fire like a machine gun. Individual, aimed, semi-automatic shots, each one as accurate as a bolt-action round, but delivered at a rate that made the Kar98k seem archaic. What Fischer and Müller would document over the next 6 days would force the German High Command to confront an uncomfortable truth. The standard German infantry rifle, the weapon carried by millions of Wehrmacht soldiers, was fundamentally outclassed by the American equivalent, not in accuracy, not in range, not in reliability, in firepower, and in modern infantry combat. Firepower determined who lived and who died. The story of how Germany came to this realization reveals the dangerous gap between tactical doctrine and material reality, between what commanders believed and what soldiers experienced, between theoretical superiority and actual performance under fire. For nearly half a century, the bolt-action rifle had dominated infantry combat. The Mauser model, 1898, refined through 2 decades of development into the Wehrmacht's standard Karabiner 98 Kurz, represented the pinnacle of bolt-action design. Adopted in 1935, the Kar98k chambered the powerful 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge. Muzzle velocity of 2,490 feet per second, effective range of 500 meters, 5-round internal magazine, fed through stripper clips, total weight of 4.1 kilograms, unloaded. The rifle was accurate. German marksmanship doctrine emphasized precision over volume. A trained infantryman could reliably hit man-sized targets at 300 meters. Expert marksmen extended that to 500 meters or beyond. The Kar98k's bolt-action mechanism was simple, robust, and reliable in any environment. Russian winter, North African desert, French mud. The rifle functioned. Production was streamlined. German factories had manufactured over 14 million Kar98k rifles by 1943. The logistics infrastructure, the training manuals, the tactical doctrine, everything in the Wehrmacht revolved around this weapon system. More critically, German infantry tactics centered on the machine gun as the primary killing weapon. The MG-34 and later the MG-42 delivered sustained automatic fire at rates exceeding 1,000 rounds per minute. German squad structure placed the machine gun team at the center. 8 riflemen with Kar98ks existed to protect the MG team, suppress enemy positions, and provide security during movement. The riflemen weren't expected to deliver overwhelming firepower. That was the machine gun's role. The rifles provided aimed precision fire to support the primary weapon system. This doctrine had proven devastatingly effective in Poland, France, and the early campaigns in the Soviet Union. German infantry squads, properly employed with their MG-centered tactics, consistently outfought equivalent Allied units. Superior training, superior tactical coordination, and the concentrated firepower of the MG-34 and MG-42 compensated for any individual weapon limitations. Then, American forces began landing in North Africa in November 1942. The first encounters at Kasserine Pass in February 1943 showed German tactical superiority. American units, inexperienced and poorly coordinated, suffered significant defeats. German after-action reports were dismissive. American soldiers were described as poorly trained. American equipment was characterized as adequate but unexceptional. The M1 Garand received brief mention in intelligence summaries. Semi-automatic rifle, 8-round capacity, suitable for a nation more concerned with quantity than quality. But scattered reports from frontline units began noting something unusual. The volume of American rifle fire seemed disproportionate to the number of soldiers visible. German squads taking fire reported continuous incoming rounds, not the measured crack, crack, crack of bolt actions being cycled. Intelligence officers attributed this to poor fire discipline. Americans were wasting ammunition, spraying rounds without proper aimed fire. It confirmed existing assumptions. American wealth allowed wasteful tactics. German efficiency and precision would prevail. What German commanders failed to recognize was that the Americans weren't being wasteful. They were employing a fundamentally different tactical philosophy built around a weapon system that made every rifleman a source of sustained fire. The M1 Garand, adopted by the United States Army in January 1936, represented the world's first standard-issue semi-automatic infantry rifle. Designed by Canadian-American engineer John Garand at Springfield Armory, the rifle employed a gas-operated rotating bolt mechanism. When a round was fired, a small portion of the expanding propellant gases was tapped through a port near the muzzle. These gases drove a piston that cycled the action, extracting the spent cartridge, cocking the hammer, and feeding a fresh round from the 8-round unblocked clip. The shooter's only action was pulling the trigger. No bolt to cycle, no sight picture to reacquire. Between shots, the rifle fired as fast as the trigger could be pulled until the 8-round clip was empty. Then a fresh clip could be loaded in approximately 2 seconds, and firing resumed. The statistics were stark. An M1-equipped American rifleman could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute under combat conditions. Some soldiers, under ideal circumstances, achieved rates exceeding 60 rounds per minute. This represented a 3 to 5-fold increase in firepower compared to bolt-action rifles. The M1 chambered the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, ballistically nearly identical to the German 7.92mm Mauser round, muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second, effective range of 500 yards, terminal ballistics sufficient to incapacitate an enemy soldier at combat distances. The rifle weighed 4.3 kilograms loaded, comparable to the Kar98k. Overall length was 1.1 meters. The gas system proved reliable across temperature extremes and environmental conditions. Tolerances were tight enough to ensure accuracy, but loose enough to function with dust, mud, and minimal maintenance. American tactical doctrine, developed throughout the 1930s, centered on the concept of fire superiority. The goal wasn't precision volleys at extended range. The goal was to deliver overwhelming volumes of fire that suppressed enemy positions, prevented enemy maneuver, and enabled friendly forces to advance or reposition. Every rifleman was expected to contribute to this base of fire. The M1 Garand made this doctrine practical. A single American infantry squad with 8 M1 Garands, 1 Browning automatic rifle and supporting weapons, could generate a continuous storm of semi-automatic fire that matched or exceeded the firepower of a German squad's rifles and often suppressed even well-positioned machine gun teams. The Germans had encountered semi-automatic rifles before. The Soviet SVT-40, a gas-operated design similar in concept to the M1, had appeared in limited numbers on the Eastern Front. German soldiers who captured SVT-40s recognized their firepower advantage, but noted reliability issues and the Soviets' inability to field them in sufficient quantities. The SVT-40 never became standard issue. Most Soviet infantry carried bolt-action Mosin-Nagant rifles throughout the war. The Americans were different. By 1943, the United States had manufactured over 2 million M1 Garands. Production continued at Springfield Armory and Winchester at rates exceeding 50,000 rifles per month. Every American infantry division fielded approximately 7,100 M1 rifles. Every replacement soldier arriving in theater carried one. The stream never stopped. German intelligence officers studying captured M1 rifles in Tunisia during the spring of 1943 produced detailed technical reports. The machining quality was excellent. The gas system was ingenious. The operating rod design was simple and effective. The unblock clip system, while unconventional, functioned reliably. But the reports concluded that adopting a similar system for the Wehrmacht was impractical. Germany's industrial capacity was fully committed to existing production. Retooling for semi-automatic rifles would cost months of output, months Germany could not afford while fighting on multiple fronts. More critically, German logistics couldn't support the ammunition consumption a semi-automatic rifle required. A Kar98k equipped infantryman carried 60 rounds of ammunition in combat, 12 5-round stripper clips. This was considered adequate for a typical engagement. An M1 equipped American soldier carried 80 rounds, minimum, often 700 or more, and consumed ammunition at 3 to 4 times the rate of a bolt-action rifleman. German supply lines, already stretched across thousands of kilometers of front in the Soviet Union and increasingly interdicted by Allied bombing, couldn't sustain that ammunition demand across millions of soldiers. The Germans did develop the Gewehr 43, a semi-automatic rifle that entered limited production in 1943. Approximately 400,000 G43 rifles were manufactured by war's end, but they never achieved widespread distribution. The average German infantryman in 1944 carried the same Kar98k his predecessors had carried in 1939. Meanwhile, American production of M1 Garands would eventually exceed 5.4 million rifles. For every one German semi-automatic rifle, the Americans fielded more than 13. This disparity didn't immediately matter in North Africa. German forces in Tunisia, though outnumbered and increasingly isolated, still employed superior tactics. The combination of experienced leadership, well-coordinated combined arms, and the devastating firepower of dug-in machine gun positions allowed German units to inflict disproportionate casualties on advancing American forces. But perceptive German officers noticed something troubling. When American units established fire superiority, even briefly, German infantry couldn't maneuver. The continuous crack of incoming semi-automatic fire Dozens of rounds snapping overhead in seconds forced German soldiers to stay down, to seek cover, to hesitate. And hesitation in combat meant death. One German after-action report from Tunisia, dated April 19, 43, noted, American rifle fire creates suppressive effect disproportionate to actual casualties inflicted. The continuous nature of incoming fire prevents tactical movement. Our doctrine assumes intermittent rifle fire between bolt-action cycles allows tactical maneuver. This assumption does not hold against semi-automatic rifles employed en masse. The report was filed, noted, and largely ignored. German High Command was focused on strategic concerns, the deteriorating situation in the Soviet Union, the impending Allied invasion of Sicily, the growing effectiveness of Allied strategic bombing. The tactical effectiveness of American infantry rifles seemed a minor concern. That would change when Hauptmann Ernst Fischer began his systematic evaluation at Kummersdorf in December 1943. Fischer's assignment was straightforward. Conduct comprehensive testing of the captured M1 Garand, evaluate accuracy, reliability, ease of use, and tactical effectiveness compared to the Kar98k. Produce a detailed report for distribution to training units, frontline commands, and weapons development offices. Fischer approached the task with the methodical precision expected of a German officer. 6 days of testing, multiple environmental conditions, comparative analysis with the Kar98k under identical parameters, objective data collection, no preconceptions. The first day focused on mechanical function and reliability. Fischer field-stripped the M1 completely, examined every component, and reassembled it. The design was elegant, fewer parts than expected. The gas system, while unconventional, was mechanically simple. The operating rod, the bolt, the trigger mechanism, all were accessible and could be maintained with basic tools. He loaded and unloaded the N-block clip repeatedly, timing the process. Average reload time, 2.1 seconds. The Kar98k, loading 5 rounds via a stripper clip, required approximately 3 seconds for an experienced soldier. The M1's 8-round capacity and slightly faster reload meant an American rifleman spent less time reloading and more time shooting. Fischer then conducted cold weather reliability testing, -15 degrees Celsius. The M1 was left outside overnight, then brought to the range without warming. He loaded a clip and fired 8 rounds. No malfunctions. He repeated the test 5 times. 40 rounds total, 0 failures. He compared this to the Kar98k under identical conditions. The German rifle also functioned flawlessly, but that was expected. Bolt actions were inherently reliable. The surprising thing was that the more complex gas-operated M1 matched that reliability. Day 2 focused on accuracy. Fischer fired groups at ranges of 100, 200, 300, and 400 meters. He used standard ammunition, both American .30-06 rounds captured with the rifle and German-manufactured ammunition loaded to similar specifications. The results were recorded in precise detail. At 100 meters, the M1 produced groups averaging 4.2 centimeters. The Kar98k averaged 3.8 centimeters, essentially identical. At 200 meters, the M1 averaged 9.1 centimeters. The Kar98k averaged 8.3 centimeters. Again, minimal difference. At 300 meters, both rifles produced groups within 15 centimeters. At 400 meters, inherent variations in ammunition and environmental conditions made differences negligible. Fischer's conclusion: the M1 Garand matched the Kar98k in practical accuracy. German doctrine emphasized precision at extended range, but the reality was that most infantry combat occurred inside 300 meters, where both rifles delivered equivalent accuracy. The notion that semi-automatic fire sacrificed precision was false. The M1 was as accurate as the Kar98k when fired carefully. It simply had the additional capability of firing rapidly when needed. Day 3 examined rate of fire under controlled conditions. Fischer fired the M1 at man-sized targets at 200 meters, firing as quickly as he could acquire each target, 8 rounds in 4.6 seconds. He reloaded 8 more rounds in 4.8 seconds. Over 5 trials, his average was 4.9 seconds for 8 aimed shots. He then fired the Kar98k under identical conditions. 8 aimed shots required 18.7 seconds on average. The difference was undeniable. The M1 delivered aimed fire at nearly 4 times the rate of the bolt-action rifle. But Fischer went further. He recruited 12 soldiers, 6 armed with Kar98ks and 6 with captured M1 Garands. He had them fire at targets under simulated combat stress, shouting commands, creating distraction, forcing rapid target engagement. The soldiers with M1s consistently delivered higher volumes of fire. More critically, their accuracy under stress remained acceptable. The semi-automatic action allowed them to stay focused on the target. The soldiers with Kar98ks, forced to work the bolt between shots, broke their sight picture, lost focus, and missed more often when rushing. Day 4 tested sustained fire. Fischer wanted to understand how the rifles performed when pushed to their limits. He fired 100 rounds through the M1 as quickly as possible, changing clips as needed. Total time, 3 minutes, 42 seconds. The rifle remained functional. The barrel became hot, but not dangerously so. No malfunctions occurred. He repeated the test with the Kar98k. 100 rounds, working the bolt as quickly as possible, required 9 minutes and 18 seconds. The barrel also heated, and the shooter's hands cramped from the repetitive bolt manipulation. The Kar98k was not designed for sustained, rapid fire. The M1 was. Day 5 involved tactical scenarios. Fischer set up mock defensive positions and had soldiers engage multiple targets while under simulated return fire. The scenarios replicated situations reported from North Africa and Sicily, American forces advancing under covering fire, German forces attempting to hold positions. The results confirmed what frontline reports had indicated. Soldiers armed with M1s could suppress German positions more effectively than soldiers with Kar98ks could respond. The volume of fire from the M1s created psychological pressure that exceeded the physical danger of individual rounds. One particularly telling scenario involved 2 soldiers, one with a Kar98k and one with an M1, engaging targets from a trench position while under simulated machine gun fire. The soldier with the Kar98k fired 8 rounds in 21 seconds, hitting 5 targets. The soldier with the M1 fired 16 rounds in 11 seconds, hitting 11 targets. Not only was the rate of fire higher, but the ability to maintain focus on targets while the rifle automatically cycled led to better hit probability. By day 6, Fischer had compiled overwhelming data. The M1 Garand was not a farmer's rifle. It was not wasteful or imprecise. It was a superior infantry weapon in nearly every measurable category, except simplicity of manufacture. His report, completed on December 24, 1943, was 32 pages of technical analysis, statistical data, and tactical conclusions. The final section, titled Implications for Wehrmacht Infantry Doctrine, made uncomfortable reading for German commanders. Fischer wrote, "The American M1 rifle provides individual soldiers with firepower previously available only from automatic weapons. A single American infantry squad, properly employed, can generate sustained fire equivalent to a German rifle platoon. This fundamentally alters the tactical balance at the small unit level. German infantry doctrine, centered on machine gun fire superiority, assumes enemy rifle fire will be intermittent and manageable. Against M1-equipped forces, this assumption is invalid. The continuous semi-automatic fire suppresses German positions, prevents tactical maneuver, and enables American forces to dictate the terms of engagement. Unless German forces achieve significant advantages in positioning, support weapons, or numerical superiority, engagements with M1-equipped American infantry will favor the Americans at the squad and platoon level. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Fischer's report was classified and distributed to selected commands in January 1944. Copies went to training schools, frontline divisions, and weapons development offices. The response was mixed. Some officers took the findings seriously, particularly those who had fought in North Africa and Italy. They had experienced American firepower firsthand. Fischer's data confirmed what they already suspected. Other officers dismissed the report. German soldiers were better trained. German tactics were superior. A mechanical advantage in one weapon system couldn't overcome overall tactical excellence. But by mid-1944, dismissing the M1's impact would become impossible. The invasion of Normandy would bring hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, each carrying an M1 Garand, into direct combat with Wehrmacht forces. What German soldiers would experience on the beaches, in the hedgerows, and across France would validate every conclusion in Fischer's report. The rifle that German intelligence had initially dismissed would systematically dismantle German tactical assumptions, one 8-round clip at a time. June 7, 1944, Omaha Beach, Normandy. Obergefreiter Paul Richter crouched in a concrete bunker overlooking the blood-stained sand below. The Americans had come ashore the previous morning, waves of landing craft disgorging soldiers into withering machine gun fire. Richter's unit, part of the 352nd Infantry Division, had killed hundreds. Bodies floated in the surf, destroyed vehicles burned on the beach. It should have been a complete defensive victory, but the Americans had broken through. By nightfall on June 6th, they had seized the bluffs, neutralized the strong points, and established a perimeter inland. Now, on the morning of June 7th, Richter and the survivors of his company were dug into a hedgerow position 3 kilometers from the beach. They could hear the Americans advancing through the bocage, the dense network of hedgerows that divided the Norman countryside into a maze of small fields and sunken lanes. Richter checked his Kar98k, 5 rounds in the magazine, 60 more rounds in pouches on his belt. He had been fighting since dawn on June 6th. 36 hours of combat, with perhaps 4 hours of sleep. His hands shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. Next to him, Gefreiter Hans Becker manned an MG-42. 200 rounds left in the ammunition belt, not enough for sustained fire. Their ammunition supply had been disrupted. No resupply had arrived since the invasion began. The sound of American voices carried through the hedgerow. English words Richter couldn't understand, but the tone was clear, calm, organized, not the panicked shouts of broken units. These were soldiers who knew what they were doing. Richter raised his rifle and waited. The hedgerow erupted in gunfire. Not from the Americans, from his own position. Becker opened fire with the MG-42. The weapon's characteristic buzzsaw sound ripping through the morning air. Richter fired, worked the bolt, fired again. Through the leaves and branches, he could see movement. American soldiers wearing mottled camouflage helmets advancing in a crouch. Then the return fire began. Richter had been in combat since 1941. He had fought in Russia. He knew what rifle fire sounded like. Soviet Mosin Nagant rifles produced a sharp crack, followed by a pause as the bolt was cycled. German Kar98ks sounded similar. You could hear the rhythm. Crack, pause, individual shots separated by the time it took to work the action. The American fire was different. It was continuous. Crack, 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 crack. No pause, no rhythm, just an unending stream of incoming rounds that tore through the hedgerow, snapped branches, kicked up dirt, and forced Richter to press himself into the earth. He tried to rise and return fire. A round slammed into the ground centimeters from his head. He ducked, tried again. Another round, then another. He couldn't get his head up long enough to aim. Next to him, Becker's MG-42 had gone silent. Richter looked over. Becker was reloading, fumbling with a fresh ammunition belt. In that 5-second pause, the American rifle fire intensified. They knew the German machine gun had stopped. They were pouring fire into the position to keep the Germans suppressed while the gunner reloaded. Richter managed to fire 3 more rounds before American soldiers appeared at the hedgerow's edge, less than 30 meters away. He worked the bolt frantically, but there were too many of them, and they were all firing. The volume of incoming rounds was impossible. He heard the distinctive ping of an empty en-bloc clip ejecting from an M1 Garand, but before he could exploit that 2-second reload window, another American was firing. Then another. They were staggering their reloads. There was never a pause in the incoming fire. Becker got the MG-42 back into action, firing a long burst that forced the Americans to take cover. But within seconds, the return fire resumed, heavier than before. Richter understood what was happening. The Americans weren't just shooting randomly. They were concentrating fire on the machine gun position. Dozens of semi-automatic rifles, all aimed at the muzzle flash of Becker's weapon. Becker fired another burst. Richter saw the impacts, bullets hitting the ground around the machine gun, hitting the weapon itself. Becker jerked backward. The MG-42 went silent again. This time, it didn't resume firing. Richter was alone. 8 Americans were advancing on his position. He had 4 rounds left in his rifle. He fired once. Missed. Worked the bolt. Fired again. 1 American went down. The others kept coming. Their M1 Garands, barking continuously. Richter worked the bolt. Fired. Worked the bolt. The rifle was empty. He reached for a stripper clip to reload. Too slow. The Americans were on top of him. He raised his hands. The battle was over. What Richter experienced that morning was being repeated across Normandy. German soldiers, veterans of years of combat, found themselves outgunned at the individual level by American riflemen. The tactical situation wasn't collapsing because of American numerical superiority. Though that was significant, it wasn't collapsing because of Allied air power. Though that was devastating. At the small unit level, in the hedgerows and fields and villages of Normandy, German infantry squads were losing firefights to American infantry squads because they couldn't match the volume of fire the M1 Garand enabled. Lieutenant Werner Kortenhaus commanded a platoon in the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend. His unit moved into Normandy on June 8th to counterattack the Allied beachhead. Kortenhaus was 23 years old, an experienced officer who had fought in Russia. His men were young, many of them 17 and 18, but they were well-trained and fanatically motivated. They expected to drive the Americans back into the sea. On June 10th, Kortenhaus's platoon engaged American forces near Kar98k. The Germans held a strong position in a stone farmhouse with clear fields of fire. 3 MG-42s covered the approaches. 30 riflemen with Kar98ks occupied windows and improvised fighting positions. American infantry approached across an open field, approximately 150 meters away. Kortenhaus ordered his men to open fire. The MG-42s opened up first, their high rate of fire tearing into the advancing Americans. Men fell. The attack should have broken. Instead, the Americans went to ground and began returning fire. The volume was staggering. Kortenhaus couldn't believe how many rounds were coming back. It sounded like the Americans had machine guns everywhere, but he could see through his binoculars that most of the fire was coming from individual riflemen with M1 Garands. His own riflemen tried to return fire, but every time a soldier exposed himself to aim, incoming rounds forced him back down. The Americans weren't firing randomly. They were concentrating fire on any visible target, suppressing German positions with precision. Kortenhaus's MG-42s continued firing, but the American return fire was targeting the machine gun positions. 1 MG-42 went silent. The gunner hit. Another ran out of ammunition. The third continued firing, but was drawing so much American fire that the position was untenable. Then the Americans began to advance again, moving in short rushes while other soldiers provided covering fire. The continuous semi-automatic fire from dozens of M1 Garands created a base of fire that suppressed Kortenhaus's entire platoon. His men couldn't rise to shoot. They couldn't maneuver. They were pinned by rifle fire alone. The Americans closed to 50 meters. Grenades came through the windows. Kortenhaus ordered a retreat. His platoon abandoned the farmhouse and withdrew to a secondary position 500 meters back. They had lost 7 killed and 14 wounded. The Americans hadn't even committed their support weapons. Just rifles. Just M1 Garands. That evening, Kortenhaus wrote in his journal, an entry that would later be recovered and translated by Allied intelligence. The American rifle gives their soldiers an advantage we cannot counter with training or courage. They fire continuously. We fire in intervals. The mathematics are brutal. In any exchange of fire, they deliver 3 times as many rounds. Our men are brave, but bravery cannot overcome that kind of firepower disparity. I do not know how we are supposed to win battles when the enemy can shoot 3 times as fast as we can. German tactical doctrine emphasized fire and maneuver. While one element laid down suppressive fire, another element maneuvered to a position of advantage. This worked beautifully when German machine guns provided the suppressive fire and German riflemen executed the maneuver. But against American forces, the Germans found themselves unable to establish fire superiority. American squads could match or exceed German machine gun fire with their rifles alone, leaving nothing for the German riflemen to exploit. By late June, German commanders in Normandy were filing reports that documented the problem in stark terms. One report from the Panzer Lehr Division, dated June 24th, stated, American infantry tactics center on achieving fire superiority through massed semi-automatic rifle fire. Their rifle squads generate volumes of fire that suppress our positions and enable their maneuver elements. Our doctrine assumes that riflemen provide precision fire while machine guns provide suppression. Against M1 equipped Americans, this doctrine is insufficient. Their riflemen provide both precision and suppression simultaneously. Recommended tactical adjustment: increase automatic weapons per squad, avoid engagement at ranges under 300 meters, where American fire superiority is most pronounced. Emphasize defensive positions that limit American ability to concentrate fire. The recommendations were sound, but implementing them was impossible. Germany couldn't increase automatic weapons production sufficiently to re-equip millions of soldiers. Avoiding close-range engagements wasn't feasible when defending fixed positions or conducting counterattacks, and defensive positions, no matter how strong, could be suppressed by American firepower and then overrun. The problem wasn't German tactics. The problem was that American soldiers carried rifles that fundamentally changed the tactical calculus. German soldiers began actively seeking to capture M1 Garands for personal use. Soldiers who acquired them, along with adequate supplies of 30-06 ammunition, preferred the American rifle to their issued Kar98k. This created logistical nightmares, mixing ammunition types and weapon systems, but frontline soldiers didn't care. They wanted the weapon that gave them the best chance of surviving. One captured German soldier, interrogated in July 1944, stated, "I carried a captured American rifle for 3 weeks before I was taken prisoner. I will never willingly carry a Kar98k again. The American rifle kept me alive. I could shoot back. With the Kar98k, I could only shoot, then hide while I worked the bolt. The Americans never had to hide." Oberst Fritz Ziegelmann, Chief of Staff of the 352nd Infantry Division, conducted a detailed analysis of his division's performance during the first 2 weeks of the Normandy campaign. His report, completed in late June, included a section on American small arms effectiveness. Ziegelmann noted that American infantry, despite often being less experienced than German troops, achieved local fire superiority in approximately 70% of small unit engagements. He attributed this primarily to the M1 Garand's rate of fire. His conclusion was blunt. The American semi-automatic rifle has negated our tactical advantage at the squad level. We can no longer rely on superior training and doctrine to compensate for material disadvantages. The weapon gives average American soldiers capabilities that match or exceed our experienced infantrymen. By August 1944, the situation in Normandy had become catastrophic for German forces. The Allied breakout from the beachhead, Operation Cobra, shattered German defensive lines. Wehrmacht units retreated in disorder toward the Seine River. The battles in Normandy had cost Germany over 400,000 casualties, including 240,000 killed or captured. Among the many factors contributing to this disaster, the tactical effectiveness of American infantry at the small unit level played a significant role. German soldiers couldn't hold positions when they were consistently outgunned in firefights. The pattern repeated across every theater where American forces fought. In Italy, German mountain infantry in strong defensive positions found themselves suppressed by American rifle fire that shouldn't have been possible at those ranges and rates. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, German assault troops achieved tactical surprise, but struggled to exploit it when American units, even when surrounded, could generate enough firepower to hold key positions. The defense of Bastogne by the 101st Airborne Division exemplified this. Surrounded German forces outnumbered the American defenders, but every American paratrooper carried an M1 Garand. The volume of fire they produced exceeded what German commanders expected from an isolated, outnumbered force. Hauptmann Fischer's report from December 1943 had predicted all of this. German commanders who had read it weren't surprised by what happened in Normandy. They were simply powerless to change the fundamental material reality. Germany couldn't produce enough semi-automatic rifles to re-equip its infantry. The Gewehr 43, Germany's semi-automatic response, remained in limited production. Total output reached approximately 400,000 rifles by war's end. The United States produced more than 5.4 million M1 Garands. The disparity was 13-1. Even if Germany had possessed the industrial capacity, the logistics couldn't have supported it. German ammunition production, targeted by Allied bombing and constrained by raw material shortages, struggled to supply bolt-action rifles. Semi-automatic rifles would have quintupled ammunition consumption. Supply lines that were already breaking down by 1944 couldn't have sustained that demand. German quartermasters calculated that fully equipping the Wehrmacht with semi-automatic rifles would have required an additional 200,000 tons of ammunition per month. That was impossible. So German soldiers continued to carry Kar98k rifles into combat against American soldiers with M1 Garands. And they continued to lose firefights they should have won, based on training and experience. The psychological impact was significant. German infantry morale, already strained by years of war and increasing casualties, suffered further when soldiers felt outgunned at the individual level. It's one thing to face superior numbers or better tanks or overwhelming artillery. Soldiers can rationalize those disadvantages. It's different when the enemy soldier standing 50 meters away can shoot 3 times as fast as you can. That's personal. That's immediate. That undermines confidence in ways strategic disadvantages don't. By 1945, as Allied forces pushed into Germany itself, the Wehrmacht was disintegrating. The reasons were numerous. Catastrophic losses on the Eastern Front, the destruction of German industry by strategic bombing, fuel shortages, the collapse of the transportation network, the loss of experienced officers and NCOs. But at the tactical level, where individual soldiers fought and died, the M1 Garand continued to provide American infantry with a measurable advantage. German soldiers defending their homeland, often fighting from prepared positions with the desperation of men who knew defeat was imminent, still couldn't overcome the firepower disparity the M1 represented. One of the last major German offensives of the war occurred in March 1945 during Operation Spring Awakening in Hungary. German forces, including SS Panzer divisions, attacked Soviet positions in an attempt to protect Hungarian oil fields. The offensive failed within days. Among the after-action reports filed by surviving German commanders was a notation that Soviet infantry, many units now equipped with captured American weapons, including M1 Garands supplied through Lend-Lease, had demonstrated significantly increased effectiveness compared to earlier encounters. German soldiers were now facing M1 Garands on both fronts. The final assessment of the M1 Garand's impact came not from battlefield reports, but from post-war interrogations of German officers. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, conducted in 1945 and 1946, interviewed hundreds of German military personnel about all aspects of the war. Questions about equipment effectiveness consistently elicited responses that ranked the M1 Garand as one of the most significant American weapons advantages. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, who had commanded the Panzer Lehr Division in Normandy, stated during his interrogation, "The American soldier was equipped with the best infantry rifle of the war. Our Kar98k was accurate and reliable, but it belonged to an earlier era. The M1 gave American infantry a concrete advantage that no amount of German tactical skill could fully overcome. In a firefight between equal numbers of Germans and Americans, the Americans would win 7 times out of 10 simply because they could shoot faster. Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the German Armed Forces High Command, when asked about American military effectiveness, cited the M1 Garand specifically. The Americans understood that modern infantry combat would be decided by firepower, not marksmanship. Their semi-automatic rifle reflected that understanding. We remained wedded to precision and economy of ammunition. The Americans were correct. Wars are won by the side that can deliver more effective fire, not by the side that fires more accurately but less frequently. These assessments weren't excuses or attempts to deflect blame for Germany's defeat. They were honest evaluations from professional soldiers who understood that material advantages, when substantial and widespread, alter tactical realities. The M1 Garand represented exactly that kind of advantage, not overwhelming, not war-winning by itself, but significant enough, distributed widely enough, that it changed outcomes at the squad and platoon level consistently across millions of individual engagements. The mathematics that Hauptmann Fischer had documented in December 1943 held true throughout the war. An M1-equipped rifleman could deliver aimed fire at 3 to 4 times the rate of a Kar98k equipped rifleman. That advantage compounded across squads, platoons, and companies. An American rifle company with approximately 190 M1 Garands could generate sustained fire equivalent to a German rifle battalion of 700 men with Kar98ks. This firepower density meant American units could hold positions with fewer soldiers, could attack with higher probability of success, and could recover from tactical setbacks more effectively. The Kar98k was not a bad rifle. It was accurate, reliable, and well-suited to the tactical doctrine Germany had developed over decades. The problem was that American doctrine had evolved beyond the bolt-action rifle's capabilities, and the M1 Garand made that doctrine practical. German soldiers fighting with weapons designed for the combat of 1918 found themselves facing American soldiers equipped for the combat of 1944. The outcome was predictable. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.